And I think that's what people are scared about in the UK when you see people saying things they shouldn't be saying, but they're saying them on Facebook and they're getting arrested and they're doing like 20 months in jail.
I haven't found there might well be a more fringe example. I think it's like 20, maybe Jamie, you can live fact check me here, maybe up to about 30-ish people have been prosecuted for stuff they've put online in the UK recently.
I think 3,000.
I believe 3. Joe Rogan just pulled the labor leader by his polished tie and slammed him right into the ring of logic, blunt truth, and pure chaos. If you thought Starmer was safe behind a podium, wait until you see him struggle through Rogan's weight-packed questions. Believe it, you've never witnessed Starmer get broken down like this before.
What's happening in England right now, isn't it?
They arrested thousands of people for social media posts.
That's crazy. Were they threatening people?
They don't have to be. They don't have to be threatening.
We also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens.
Keir Starmer, the living definition of plain porridge, made the fatal error of landing on Joe Rogan's radar. And everyone knows, once Rogan senses weakness, he doesn't just point it out. He delivers a 3-hour demolition, complete with elk meat on the side, and a kettlebell showcase for emphasis.
Tears being shed over J.D. Vance's speech.
What was it about his speech in particular that was offensive?
He turned it onto the European Union and to EU countries and the UK in particular, talking about how their biggest threat isn't necessarily Russia or China. Their biggest threat is what they're doing to themselves in terms of suppressing free speech from all the various groups out there, including conservative groups, far left.
Starmer, the self-proclaimed leader of the UK Labour Party, has spent years trying to out-Tory the Tories without officially joining them. Quite an achievement if your aim is to win first place in political identity confusion. He rose to Labour's leadership pledging renewal, direction, and clarity. What Britain received instead was a man who approached politics like a courtroom file, overly cautious, emotionally vacant, and only slightly more exciting than watching paint dry. Then boom, Joe Rogan entered the scene.
Fair, right? I mean, most of Europe at this point is pretty fed up with the immigration policies that their leaders
Which is why they want to suppress the dissent online.
Exactly.
They're not doing it because they genuinely think this is a moral and ethical thing to do. No. They're doing it because they sense an uprising.
Yeah, and they rightly should. Look, Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, he's not getting reelected, and their election is coming up here shortly. Yeah. And so that's not going to happen for him. So I think, they're not rightly, but they are concerned about their own political power. That's
what it is, and that's what people need to understand.
It's not rocket science.
It's not that the Europeans are the kinder, more progressive. No, they understand that.
Rogan didn't need to yell, gesture, or even raise an eyebrow. He tore Starmer apart like a soggy sandwich left on a train station bench. Without mentioning him by name, Rogan revealed the hollow archetype. The politician convinced that doing absolutely nothing with maximum enthusiasm somehow motivates millions. Let's be honest, Starmer isn't merely dull. He's politics turned into elevator music. Harmless, yes, but so lifeless it makes you question your reason to keep listening.
He wrote a column, or he was quoted saying something along the lines of that you should take seriously the concerns that lots of rank and file, just members of the British public have about immigration and the border. And I don't know if
he's right about that.
Yeah.
It is a big issue. But, what he did in 97 when he got a landslide victory was he took the Labour Party to the centre ground and planted it where the British public...
With his signature blunt precision, Rogan shredded the absurdity of a leader who spends more effort dodging positions than taking them. Starmer's whole career feels like a masterclass in avoidance. If leadership were dodgeball, he'd be the one hiding behind the bleachers clutching a clipboard. There's a dusty corner in the political museum reserved for men who mistake standing still for progress, and Starmer's display would be titled How to Lose While Technically Winning. Rogan nailed the satire perfectly. The illusion that you can run a nation by playing it safe, dodging conflict, and waiting for opponents to crumble. Starmer is like a living screensaver. He appears, drifts, and disappears when no one's looking. But the real knockout came when Rogan exposed his Olympic-level U-turns. Starmer doesn't just flip-flop. He pirouettes through ideological gymnastics Simone Biles would cheer for. One day, it's tuition-free promises. The next, it's fiscal restraint. One week, he's the champion of the working class. The next, he's clinking glasses with hedge fund elites who think proletariat is a luxury brand. Rogan didn't need to quote him once. He sketched the portrait of a man so afraid to offend that he ended up inspiring no one. To labor loyalists, Starmer is like vegan bacon. Interesting at first glance, but ultimately confusing and completely unsatisfying.
Find to be a hateful thing or a problematic thing. And I think it's only 200 in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe in Russia they're too scared to do it at all.
Could be. Yeah. But the fact that they're comfortable with finding people who've said something that they disagree with and putting them in a fucking cage in England in 2024 is really wild.
Yeah.
Especially they're saying you get arrested just for retweeting something.
Then came Rogan's demolition of Starmer's so-called charisma, or more accurately, the complete lack of it. He joked that if you plugged Starmer into a socket, he'd trip the breaker not from too much energy, but from having none at all. Starmer delivers speeches with the enthusiasm of a GPS voice. Even his gestures feel less like motivation and more like someone miming a coffee order across a noisy train platform. While the world burns with culture wars and economic turmoil, Starmer strolls onto the battlefield like a substitute teacher on Dress Down Friday. Rogan had a field day with it, tearing apart the ridiculous notion that this man, a walking legal disclaimer, could ever fire up a nation. He's not there to inspire. He's there to make sure the forms are signed correctly. Rogan also ripped into Starmer's lawyer first, leader second mindset. Everything about his politics runs through a legal filter. His statements sound like disclaimers, and his policies read like settlement agreements. For Starmer, leadership isn't conviction, it's plausible deniability. He doesn't stride into a room, he tiptoes in, risk assessment firmly in hand.
Now in England, where people getting arrested for tweets.
Yeah. Well,
England, people talk about Soviet Russia, like how bad Russia is in terms of cracking down on thought police and cracking down on bad tweets and things like that. I think the statistics are, I think England I think there's something like 4,000 people have been arrested in England for thought crimes where they've said things online that people find to be a hateful thing.
And let's not forget the strikes. While workers across the UK battled for fair pay and basic dignity, Starmer lingered somewhere between the office copier and moral apathy. Rogan mocked this lukewarm stance, pretending neutrality while silencing Labour MPs who dared to show courage. He nailed the image perfectly. Starmer wasn't Switzerland. He was beige paint pretending to be granite. Then came the so-called policy platform, or rather, the ghost of one. Rogan exposed the hollowness of Starmer's grand vision. No ambition, no bold course. Just a PowerPoint slide reading, "Don't mess up." Britain faces a housing meltdown, a crumbling healthcare system, and frozen wages. Starmer's reply? Polished caution and a shiny slogan. The man could watch the Titanic sink and calmly announce upgrades to the deck chairs. And the cherry on top? His entire strategy depends on the Conservatives imploding. That's not leadership. That's loitering. While Rishi Sunak and his crew of chaos merchants set themselves on fire, Starmer's master plan is to point at the blaze and shrug. Rogan summed it up perfectly. Being less bad than the other guy isn't strategy. It's political loitering dressed in a tailored suit.
And here's the problem with that. Even if you say, yeah, well, people shouldn't tweet hateful things. I agree. They shouldn't. But who's to decide what is a hateful thing?
That's the problem. It's
That's
subjective.
the problem. It's very subjective.
And it still shouldn't be a crime.
And in our lifetime, we've seen that get moved, right? So it used to be if a guy thought he was a woman and his name was Doug and you grew up with Doug, and all of a sudden Doug wants to be called Debbie, if you call him Doug, it's no big deal. Like, yeah, maybe you're being
What made the segment so entertaining was how effortlessly Rogan exposed the absurdity without resorting to cheap shots. He didn't mock Starmer's appearance or hurl wild insults. Instead, he hit him with comparisons so sharp they were impossible not to laugh at, like saying that if leadership were a YouTube video, Starmer would be the buffering icon. Rogan's breakdown felt like opening a present only to find an instruction manual inside. Technically useful, but emotionally crushing. Starmer isn't awful because he's cruel. He's awful because he's endlessly uninspiring. He's the political version of hearing your train is delayed due to leaves on the line, mildly irritating and painfully British. Each time Rogan shifted topics, Starmer's detachment from the working class, his obsession with sterile press events, the air seemed to thin. The image became clearer. A man who craves power but fears passion. Starmer leads the way, a screensaver starts conversations, purely by existing. And then there's his corporate comfort zone. Most of his labor leadership has been spent assuring big business that he's not the frightening kind of left wing.
Okay, in terms of the illegal immigration, and if we ever get a government that's going to deal with that, we're also going to have to remove a lot of people who are there illegally. They shouldn't be there. A lot of them are. And, like I said, we had a report that shows they're way more likely to commit sexual crimes, way more likely to commit violent crimes, they're way more likely to commit all sorts of crimes. We are going to have to remove them, but you have to do it in a way where there's due process and a respect.
Are they trying to remove them in England?
No.
At all?
No. They're saying they are, but they're not removing them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the mistakes like that have to be corrected if you want reasonable people to be on board with you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. And he's definitely pulled it off. Even hedge fund managers now refer to him as Sir Safe Hands. Rogan compared him to a watchdog so obedient it's forgotten how to bark. Starmer may head a workers' party, but he treats unions like that distant cousin you only meet at funerals. Rogan didn't need piles of research or a heated debate. Just facts and that classic, "Are you kidding me?" Look, he portrayed Starmer as a man who prizes poll-tested slogans over real change. Someone who sees charisma as a threat and energy as a gamble. If Britain wanted a walking insurance policy, it's found one. What makes Rogan's critique sting is its simplicity. He doesn't shout. He observes. He doesn't twist the truth. He just points out the absurd reality hiding in plain sight. That's why the satire hits so deeply. Starmer isn't uniquely terrible. He's painfully average in a world starving for courage. Rogan simply held up a mirror, and Britain collectively winced. By the end of the takedown, the image was crystal clear. Keir Starmer standing in the ruins of modern politics, clutching a half-written policy memo, praying no one asks the hard questions. Rogan didn't destroy him with fury. He did it with laughter. And that, honestly, cuts much deeper.
Every government wants to eventually completely and totally control its population because it's way easier for them to make money. And that's what they like to do. They like to make money. They like to be in bed with the lobbyists in the military-industrial complex and the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, and they like to impose their will on people. And if you can't express yourself and say, hey, this is fucked up, this is crazy, why am I doing this? Like, these studies show that you're not correct. You can't say all those things, which right now you can't do in Canada. It's not the same. Their ability to express himself on the internet has been so...
Starmer's grand strategy? Simply not being as catastrophically bad as the Tories. That's it. No excitement, no daring policies. Just the faint hope that Rishi keeps tripping from one scandal to another, while Starmer quietly fades into the wallpaper. Watching it unfold feels like cheering for a runner who wins only because everyone else crashed into a wall and stayed there. Rogan shredded the absurdity, the idea that leading a nation means standing still, arms folded, praying the public forgets how dull you are. That's not leadership. That's political camouflage. Starmer's charisma isn't just weak. It's lukewarm tea in human form. Picture an engine sputtering along, not broken, but pleading for a jump start. That's Starmer's energy in one sentence. Rogan didn't stop there. He cast Starmer not as a steady pilot, but as a blinking caution sign warning Britain that nothing bold or transformative will ever leave his desk. He's the political version of elevator music. Safe, forgettable, and painfully bland. When was the last time anyone left a Starmer speech feeling inspired? Exactly. His vision for Britain feels like an endless PowerPoint about reorganizing your sock drawer. Practical maybe, but soul-crushing. Rogan's final blows landed harder than a kettlebell to the gut. Britain deserves better than a leader whose biggest decision is whether to wear navy blue or slightly darker navy blue. If Starmer becomes prime minister, it won't be through inspiration or strategy. It'll be by cosmic accident, like tripping over a rug and landing on the throne. The harsh truth? Starmer isn't a leader. He's a placeholder, a bookmark wedged between more interesting chapters. His entire act revolves around not scaring voters away rather than drawing them in. He's the political equivalent of a beige wall, safe, bland, and instantly forgotten. Meanwhile, the nation waits for someone with fire, ideas, and direction. Someone who can lead instead of merely existing. Rogan's verdict couldn't have been clearer. Starmer's strategy isn't a vision, it's simply the avoidance of disaster. That might scrape by in mediocrity, but it's a recipe for collapse if you want real leadership. Because if politics were a video game, Starmer would be the player hiding behind the couch, hoping the monster walks past. Spoiler alert, the monster always finds you.